Today, I want to look at another aspect of what we think is entailed by civil liberty, namely the freedom of speech and the First Amendment. This topic came up this week, for me at least, because the Supreme Court recently denied certiorari, meaning it refused to grant an appeal to some people who were complaining about a statute enacted in Tennessee a couple of years ago that criminalized public drag shows if they were obscene for minors and minors were present. So they said that the law was unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. In the press release from the Attorney General about the decision of the Supreme Court, he said something, and I want to quote it here correctly. Free speech is a sacred American value, but the First Amendment does not require Tennessee to allow sexually explicit drag performances in front of children. Now, I would say more to the point that the First Amendment has absolutely nothing to do with this statute at all regarding these drag performances. So let me explain. To explain, though, I'm going to have to use some quotes from Joseph Story, who was one of the early learned jurists on the United States Supreme Court, highly esteemed, highly respected, wrote the first commentary on the Constitution that was published in 1833, and taught at Harvard University. So I'm going to have to look at some notes to get the quotes correct, because I don't have a copy of his commentaries, a physical copy. So what does the First Amendment actually say? It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, that's the religion clause, right? Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, the free exercise clause, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition government for a redress of grievances. Now, the first obvious question we should have is, well, since it begins with Congress shall not, why does it even apply to a state law? But that's a question for another day that we need to get into. And the Supreme Court has made a mess of applying portions of the Bill of Rights to the states through the 14th Amendment. But we'll move on past that. So what was this clause, free speech clause is how it's denominated, this freedom of speech or of the press. What was it for? And Story wrote in his commentary that it, quote, respects the liberty of the press. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a drag show, I don't think about the press, okay? It's conduct, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and address the drag show and the free speech clauses as if it does apply to the drag shows, to what I would essentially call conduct, certain types of conduct. And so speech, as distinguished from printed materials of various kinds, comes into play with this quote from Justice Story. The language of this amendment imports no more than every man shall have a right to speak, write, and print his opinions upon any subject whatsoever without any prior restraint. It doesn't say you can say anything you want. In fact, he said it was, quote, never intended to secure to every citizen an absolute right to speak or write or print whatever he may please without any responsibility, public or private. Therefore, it was the prior restraint that the First Amendment was getting to, and it's made clear in the history behind that clause that Joseph Story lays out. But let's just go ahead and assume that speech is somehow equated with conduct. Where did that come from? Well, it came from an essay written by Supreme Court justices in support of a judgment decades ago in which they equated speech with expressive conduct. Okay. Now, of course, that essay, which we call opinions, was never ratified and put into the Constitution, so it's not a part of the oath to uphold Supreme Court opinions, whatever they may happen to be from time to time. It's to uphold the text of the Constitution, understood in light of the common law and its history. So how does this apply to the drag show situation? Well, I would just simply say, and I'm going to make more points in my podcast, God, Law, and Liberty, on Friday, but at least fundamentally, this criminal statute is not a prior restraint on drag show speech. Okay? You can get on the stage and drag all you want, but a district attorney, at least in Tennessee, the prosecutor, that's what we call him, he can say, your speech actually was obscene to minors, and minors were present, and I'm going to prosecute you after the fact. See, it's not a prior restraint. And he can present his opinion to a jury, and the dragster can present his opinion, and a panel of citizens, tried and true, can decide, this was wrong, and you'll have to suffer the consequences of it. So there's nothing about this drag show criminal statute that in any way touches on the free speech clause, because one, it's conduct, and two, it's not a prior restraint. So there we go. Hope that's helpful.